a technological. That's like ninth inning with 2 outs. Okay, we're here, we're recording, and I'm Avram Shira, and welcome to the Lighthouse Project. And I've been doing this online Torah for about 13, 14 years, and it always seems when I come up with something to teach that's a little bit out there, as Mike said, the Yetzer Hara is kind of like watching. So we'll be careful. He's okay. He's also a servant of God. Unfortunately, he picked the wrong job. So he's going to have to be swallowed up, and we'll soon be rid of the Yetzer Hara altogether, and he'll go back wherever he has to go. But tonight we're going to learn some very interesting material, and I highly recommend everyone to have a paper and pencil handy, because we're going to work some interesting things of letter permutations of another sort. There was a great rabbi in Portugal and then in Eretz Israel in the 1500s. His name was Rabbi Yosef Albertini, and he was a contemporary of the Rambam. Actually, no, that's not correct. He was a commentator on the Rambam, but in the 15th century, of course, it was right around the time of the Inquisition, and so the Jews had to leave Spain and Portugal. He was Portuguese. He ended up in Jerusalem, Rabbi Yosef, and he was a master Kabbalist and a student also of Rabbi Avraham who was not the most popular character in the Jewish world. He had gone to try to convert the Pope, and that's usually not a good idea, Popes don't like converting to Judaism. Popes like converting Jews. And so a miracle was done. The Pope died after he issued an order against Rabbi Avraham Abulafia. But some of his students, including this Rabbi Yosef, wrote books that collated various parts of his teachings. And we're going to learn from a book called Sulam Aliyah, The Ladder of Ascent. This is a heavy-duty Kabbalah book, and very few people learn it. If I ask people around the yeshiva about it, I've never almost known anybody who's even learned it, but of course I'm not the beginning or end of anything. However, he's going to teach us about letter permutations in a way that is a type of wisdom. It's extremely deep, but anybody can actually do it if they know Hebrew, or they begin to know Hebrew, if they have a dictionary, if you have, Google Translate, you can learn a lot very quickly nowadays. And what we're going to learn how to do is to permute letters, which literally means changing the order of the letters in words, and permute letters from different languages as well, to extract wisdom. Because the Hebrew letters are endless, and they contain wisdom of all types, and not just metaphysical, but also from the natural world, the world of sciences. And so, but I want to just read a little bit from the Rav, and he's going to tell us some things that are pretty powerful. He tells us like this: I called to these pathways of using the letters of Dilug and Kfitza, Tachlit Kol HaDurachim, the goal and purpose of all different types of Kabbalah, letter work and permutations, meditations, and we've been doing quite a few, here on the Lighthouse over the past few weeks, and it's not simple stuff. You have to be able to visualize letters, you have to be able to see vowels, you have to understand what we're doing, what they represent, what we're trying to accomplish. Okay, and so he tells us Kefitzat and Dilug literally means skipping and jumping. But there are many types of skipping and jumping also. Skipping and jumping here, the Rav Kaplan explains, means skipping from word to word or letter to letter in a system. And jumping means jumping from system to system, because there are many different cipher systems of ways to use the Aleph Bet. Now, a cipher is like a code, just like if you learn codes for the United States Navy, that codes are simply taking information and rewriting it in language that no one else understands. except for, the course, the people you want to understand. But so in Kabbalah, we also have the many different ciphers or different ways of spelling words in Hebrew. And we're not going to go into that tonight because that's even more complex. What we're going to learn is how letters can be turned, changed, and meanings can be manipulated to create different vessels for the light of Hashem in our consciousness. Because remember, Hashem's light is way above anything called letters or above alphabet. Hashem's light is above the Torah. Hashem's light is above creation itself, of course. Hashem's light is above history, time, space. And the infinite light is looking to express itself through vessels. The chief vessel that God looks for to express himself is the human mind that's been unified with the human heart. And when the two are one, when Chokhmah and Bina are one, there's a constant stream of energy flowing through the mind that flows to the heart. And that creates what's called the Kav Yarok, the green line of renewal that reflects the union of the heart and the mind. Now, if you've never had this experience, it's something to strive for. Believe me, it's something that will change you. Because we think that our mind and our heart are unified because I think a thought and then maybe it causes a feeling within. Or I have a feeling and it generates a thought. But that's still two different functions of the soul. But there is a time when the functions of the soul unify and you actually think with feeling and feel with thought. And this is written about in the Sefer Yetzirah. It's also going to be something that we'll touch on as we go forward. But understand this well, that we live in captivation of thought. We are not free thinkers yet. We might think we are because I went to college, or I studied higher mathematics, or I studied Kabbalah. Whatever it is, it's not really the freedom of the mind from the prison of the body, because our mind is a much higher tool than we realize, but our bodies are blocking the mind's ability to travel and to contemplate and to influence, because the human mind is made to travel and influence, but the body prevents us from doing so. So many of the tools and the exercises we do in Jewish meditation are designed to free the mind in tiny bits, because if you free the mind too fast, which is essentially what happens when a person takes drugs, especially, acid and things like that, they free the mind too fast without having the proper landing gear, without knowing how to fly your plane. You're going to be in trouble. And so we don't want to do that. What we want to do is free the mind step by step according to the sages, because when we do so, we know how to land. We know how to come back to our lives and be the same healthy and better people. Whereas as a therapist, I've met many people who have taken drugs and they've destroyed their capacity to be in this world in a really functional, useful way. And that's really sad, because you see some brilliant people never come back the same. So we don't want to do that. We want to stay in vessels, but we have to understand that the vessel of our mind is a limitation unto itself. Okay, so the Rav's going to talk about this in this context here, that this idea of jumping and skipping is also the idea of skipping letters, like you can in a code, like the Bible codes, and jumping can also mean that you use your mind to leap over obstacles in consciousness. For example, let's say you sit down to meditate and you try to think about God, and all you can think about is your ex-husband who you hate. That's a good one, right? Well, you're not going to be able to meditate as long as you hold on to that hatred. You need to be able to jump out of that quickly. You don't need 20 years of therapy to get over a bad marriage. You need to learn that your mind is capable of leaping over these obstacles. And all forms of prejudice, all forms of negativity are actually psychic obstacles to our growth. So pay attention. So the Rav continues to tell us that לפי שכמו שהסיבה התכליתי היא מעולה מכל הסיבות הקודמים לה. So just like the ultimate purpose of our work is the most important purpose of what we do. In other words, our goal is to serve God. Our goal is to be attached to God. Those are the ultimate purposes that we set out in our work. But there are many interim goals and purposes that lead us to our main goal. Okay, and he'll explain further. Lefi shekulam, all the reasons for what we do, lo nimtsa'u ki'im ba'avora uba nichlalim kulam. Because sometimes the reasons for what we do are included together. And so we don't actually know what we're doing, or we don't have set out our kavana clearly. This is why in Kabbalah, it's so important to have clear kavana, because if you just set out vague, guess where you get up, where you get to? You get to vague. We don't want to get to vague. We want to be precise and specific. We want to be next to the King of Kings. We want to be his man. We want to be his woman in the world, and do what we can do and influence in a positive way, because there's plenty of people who are not trying to influence in a positive way. So to all the levels that we've learned about before, and we're in the 8th chapter of the book. I skipped several chapters because I wanted to lead to this. Everything we learned before is still a preparation and an introduction to what we need to learn now. And these derachim tzrichim li sheyada adam kodem sheyavo lasot tishtamesh b'derech hadilug. And we need to know these other ways, and we've been practicing them without me telling you that it's all in this book, that the idea of visualization, the idea of breathing, the idea of chanting, the idea of vowelization, the idea of seeing in 3 dimensions. And by the way, Rabbi Kaplan talks about seeing in 5 dimensions, which is another whole thing. We're not going to go there tonight. And so there are all these different tools, the idea of gematria, how to manipulate letters and words, how to take a letter apart and put it back together. An aleph is a vav with 2 yuds. And then you could take that apart and then put it back together into other words. These are all preliminary tools to lead us to what we're going to hit upon tonight. Ki lefi ha'emet, according to the truth, v'chisaron yediatam, through the lack of what we know, lo yada lifol ishtamesh b'zeh haderech. People, he's talking about, he's a master Kabbalist from the 15th century talking here, folks. And he's telling people in his generation that they don't know what they're doing. So maybe that, I don't know, it's kind of a twisted way of feeling okay, but we should understand that you can know the whole Talmud, but not know what's going on here. And I learned Talmud, but I wouldn't say that I'm a expert teacher of Talmud by any means. However, he says that Dasher Habaki Bo Yoda, because the one who is expert in these pathways and knows them, Vizariz Mahir Vasiato, and he's zealous and he's quick about his work, Vishlemut, completely, Nafsho mit Rachevet, his soul widens. What we've been trying to do, just like we did last week, we tried to meditate on letters that going into the distance, from a letter that's like a mountain, and you're a tiny speck at the bottom of the mountain, until the letter is far off in the distance. It's a tiny letter, and you're barely seeing it in the screen of your eye. What we're trying to do there is marchiv, to widen our perspective. So there's many ways to do that. So that's one of the things we were trying to do last week. But here the whole soul expands. Like when you see a beautiful view and you go, it's so beautiful. That's actually a moment of soul expansion, because your eye is a tiny little thing and it takes a picture of a very big thing. And that big thing enters your mind and goes into your heart, and it opens your heart. That's why you have that good feeling when you see a beautiful view. And that's called also harchavat nefesh. You're widening your soul. ומוציא מחשבת בתוך מאסר. And guess what you find? You find that your own thought is imprisoned, that you can't really go everywhere you want to go. O gavul ativi, and the natural boundary of thought is in place. Because, folks, our souls are not rooted in this world. Our souls are rooted above time and space because we contain portions of God. Each divine spark in each person has a portion of God, and that spark is above time and space. So by connection, we are also in our root, though we don't necessarily know it or live it or experience it. But I bet if you knew the inside out of your own metaphysical experiences, that you would be able to identify it. And I know that I had experiences that were above time and space long before I was religious and before I learned these books. And only after learning the books that I say, oh, what that happened? This is what he's talking about here. And so on and so forth. So we have to first understand that to free our mind, we have to understand that our mind is not free. Okay. And people don't like to admit that. Let's face it. Okay. We don't like to face our limitations. But in this work, we have to be brutally honest, because we can't go where we can possibly go if I'm holding on to my childish self-perceptions. All right, so first, when I understand I'm limited, wow, then I can start to grow. Just like if I understand that I don't love something, then I can start to love it. But if I'm in illusion about loving something or understanding something, I see this, as a teacher, you see a lot of things. And as a therapist, you see even more. But, you'll ask somebody a question to see if they understand you, and they'll say, yeah, but they really don't. But they're embarrassed to say that they don't understand. See, that's a problem, especially in Kabbalah. We can't afford that. So we need to be humble and honest, and we'll be fine. Now, so he goes on to tell us, and in this context of widening the mind and freeing the mind from its boundaries, are included gematriot, of course, which are letter numerals, the numerical system of Kabbalah, but tziruf gilgul, adding also onto it reincarnation, and the letters otiot v'chilukikam, and the way the letters are split and separate and join each other and create new words and letters, pirudim, and the separations, and the chiburim, and the attachments between letters. You'll notice in Hebrew, a lot of letters are always appearing next to another letter. And then there's other letters that almost never appear next to certain other letters. That's what he's talking about there. So we're talking about this sensitivity to language that is a very high level. But okay, we're going to come down from this level pretty soon. And we're also going to know about the mishkalan, the weights of letters. Now, how do you weigh a letter? What do you mean, weigh a letter? Well, if I say Aleph, the first letter, that should sound light to you. Aleph. Now, if I say tough, look what tough, the letter tough, what does it mean in English? Tough, right? A tough guy. So, but think about it for a second. The sound itself is a harsh sound, tough. Whereas Aleph, it's not a harsh sound. So the letters have different weights. Or shin. Shin is compared to the sound that a rattlesnake makes in the Kabbalah. Shin, like a snake's rattle. That's an intense sound. Whereas if you take the sound for Lamed, it's a soft sound. And so on and so forth. So that's the weighing of letters. And there's other ways to weigh letters, okay? All right. Cindy, we'll miss you, but you can catch the Lighthouse class on the Lighthouse Facebook page, and I'm sure that the recording will be good. Okay, now there's other things he tells us. For example, so all these ways that we've been talking about through the weeks and the months here, we need to know them and we need to work fast to free the mind. And there are many others. I don't want to overwhelm us with information. The chilufam and tamuratan, the exchanging of letters and the switching of them. So it's a lot. It's really a lot of information, and we don't need a lot to do what we're going to do tonight. We need a little bit. Okay. Now, and he tells us like this. In this work, these types of meditations are designed to free our mind from their natural boundary. And it can bring us to the boundary of godliness. And the soul is stripped of the external forces and it is refined. The soul becomes more refined, which means more sensitive and more paying attention to things that we often don't pay attention to. Until you can see, this is outrageous, you could see your soul is separated from your body. Now, people often can have that experience. Usually it comes on the tail of a trauma. And we don't want to reach this experience through trauma, obviously. But this is a real thing. And a person can get to the point where he has no hashkacha on his body, would mean he's not really even worried about the body or paying attention to it. See, because part of your soul will keep your body going, even though the higher part of you can travel elsewhere. As the Baal Shem Tov tells us over and over, you are where your thoughts are. And he goes on, what happens? Because of the Rov Devekut, the great attachment of the Beshoresh HaMakor, in the root of the source, Asher Mimenu Chutzva, from which he was carved out of. Because we say that each soul is like coming from a massive soul, and each person is a little piece of the rock. I'm sorry to use that cliche, but I think it works. And so, someone who has great longing and desire to know the truth and to know Hashem, and he wants to know God so bad that you don't really consider your body and its powers, kochotav, ke'ein le'erech. You're not really the type of person who's worried about your makeup or how big your muscles are. Okay? That's part of the refinement process. And what you can achieve with your mind is nothing. It makes the body and its powers look like nothing. Sha'az aheshek harav hazeh megia et anefesh umagabir hamumo. And so that until that you empower your soul and you increase its heat and its power, and you can increase your thought speed as well, folks. This is how you get the new downloads. This is how you get to think faster. Because the idea is that our mind is still operating in potential, and you don't need Rabbi Yosef Albutini to tell us this. The scientists have been telling us that most humans are operating on 5 to 10% of their mental power. That's what he's referring to here. When we talk about seichel b'koach, we talk about potential mental power, and then seichel b'poal is where your mind is able to go out and do things in the world in a real way, in a positive way. Umitabeket b'sechel ha'po'al, and it attaches to the real active intellect of the universe, which is, of course, God's mind. Umetzar itapkut hazeh mitlabeshet hanefesh, and from the side of the attachment of the soul, bekoach amidame, to the power of imagination, betzorat hadamut, until in the form of resembling mashlimato, and he completes it begilui atidot, until he'll have the revelation of the future. Sound familiar? That you have to attach yourself to God's mind to know what he knows. And he knows the future very well and the past very well. And he allows us to live right in the middle between the two, in the present. And he says, you know what, folks, I created you to change reality, to make life better than I've made it, to be my partner in creation. That's what the Messianic era is about, that we actualize these powers, not just as Jews, but as human beings for the rest of the world. And so we shouldn't think that it's all known by God and therefore I don't have to do anything. And I shouldn't think, well, it's all me and so therefore I don't have to worry about God. Both of those are completely wrong metaphysical positions. The real position is God knows everything and he gives me a chance to interact with the system for good and for better and for achieving his goals. And he goes on to explain Atidot Horot and Istarot, and also to teach about hidden things, b'ma shavikesh, or what you might ask. You also get a carte blanche to ask God questions and get answers. V'sham dimyono u'machshavto, and there his imagination and his thought. Now, I want to point out here, imagination and thought are not everything. I jumped over to Rhonda's thought. Rhonda, it looked like what you were saying was right on. I didn't read the whole thing before it was taken down, but yes, I'll just say yes. But here, the point I want to make is that imagination and thought are not the same thing. However, there is a similarity, obviously. Thought is a pure comprehension of fact. Imagination might be true and it might not be true. Okay? Pure thought means I'm not adding to the recipe of what I think or see or hear or smell. Right? Pure thought is an idea without any human personality attached to it. Dimayon, imagination, is where we manipulate thought according to our vessel, right? According to the way who I am. If I'm a hot-tempered person, well, then I'm going to twist reality in that way, my vision plane of reality. If I'm a calm person, then I'll create calm, and so on and so forth. And so Dimayon, though, is really where we're operating in the world of exaggerating truth. Pure truth is pure objective truth is where God resides. But he gives us the opportunity to attach to that or to live in the world of our own exaggerations. And people love to exaggerate because that's how we express ourselves. Oh, it's so hot. Well, maybe it's not so hot to other people. But for me, it's unbearable. God says, well, I'm not sure if it's really unbearable. I just made it hot today because I want to kill some coronavirus. We had a few of those weeks this summer. Okay. But really, we have to understand and make this distinction between thought and imagination because they are not the same. But when we purify thought and imagination, we can leda me'inyanim midumim. We can know what's true and what's not true. So we can examine our own imaginations and say, wait a minute, that wasn't a correct thought. I do this a lot. I have a thought and I look at it and I say, wait a minute, that's not fair. That's not honest. That's not direct. That thought is biased by something else that I have to fix. But we have to have that level of honesty. And furthermore, then when this soul is freed from the body, it is refined further and it has pleasure in the power of the mind. The true pleasure of this world has nothing to do with this world. The true pleasure of this world is the pure experience of mind. Umashlimato vasagat muskalot, and we complete it in the comprehension of godly intellectual ideas and ne'elamot, which are hidden, v'sitre mitziut, within the hidden places of reality, olam hazeh, of this world, and olam haba. In other words, there is this idea of knowing this world very well, knowing what's behind the curtains of this world, and knowing about the future of the world to come. And you can also come to know what God knows. And his simple creations. And you will understand, to grasp and to understand. Or he's going to go on to explain this further, more in another chapter, what he calls the 10 types or pathways of hitbodedut, which is self-isolation and prayer. It's not necessarily the type of hitbodedut that we relate to from Rabbi Nachman, which is going out and being alone in nature and talking to God, which is obviously, he said it's the highest of all practices, and it is, because it's shaveh lekol nefesh. Every single person, from the most intelligent to the simplest, can go out and talk to God and achieve tremendous things. Here he's talking about the hitbodedut of the soul from the body. And so it's another level. And he tells us, and Adam magia elav, and he can get to this level through this interim tool, this technique, a derech shel dilug v'kvitza, this level of jumping from letter to letter, from idea to idea, from system to system, of all the things that we've been learning already. Okay. Now he's going to show us some examples, and I would suggest you write them down. I hope all of you are able to write the letters down. If you're not, it's going to be difficult a little bit, but we have to learn the Aleph Bet, bottom line. You don't have to be a master of Hebrew speech, but we have to understand the Aleph Bet and the basic structures of the letters, etc. Okay. So the first example of this idea of kvitza dilug, jumping and skipping, he brings a very simple word, the word itself, dilug, which is, now I'm writing down, even though I have it in front of me in the book, I'm writing it down because I want to be with you in this. Dalet, Lamed, Vav, Gimel. Dilug, it means to jump. Now there's 4 letters here. So what does the Rav do? He's going to skip and exchange letters. This is called permutation. Instead of writing it Daled, Lamed, Vav, Gimel, Dilug, he's going to write Daled, Gimel, Lamed, Vav. And that means his flag. We've completely changed the meaning of the word using the exact same letters. We've manipulated the phonetic group called Dilug, Daled, Vav, Lamed, Gimel, and we've made Diglo his flag, which if anybody's familiar, it's a famous verse that he's going to bring also from Shira Shirim, Degel Ahava Alai, where the beloved in the Shira Shirim says that the flag of his love is upon me. Now the next word is Dagul. That's another way of spelling those 4 letters. And Godel, of course, is a well-known word. Godel, the size of a thing. Okay, now we have 4 permutations of those 4 letters. What's going on? Well, the gul, I didn't look that word up. I have a dictionary here. Probably, I know it's a word that it seems to strike a memory chord, but I want to just get the actual simple word down, dagul. And you're going to see how this works. It's really amazing. And when you do it in your mind, by the way, this without writing it down, you could just do the letter permutations in your mind. It's like your mind becomes a letter cycler, and you're cycling the letters through your reality. Distinguished. Oh, thank you, Rena. I knew I could count on you. Your computer is faster than my Jastro dictionary. So, distinguish. Dagul is distinguish. But I think that means distinguish in a positive context, not to distinguish between things, but rather to be distinguished. Okay? But godol means, of course, godol means the size of a thing. So we have jumping, the flag, distinguished, an adjective, and godel, which is the size of a thing. Now, what we see here is that these letters are using sound to create concepts, okay? And so when we're attached to the letters, we start to receive from the concept, the essence of the thing itself. And he does another one. He takes the word tzeruf, which is what we're talking about, means permutation. Tzeruf and tzadik, resh, vav, hey sofit. And then soref, all you do is switch the vav. A tzeruf is a permutation. A soref is a silversmith. And a poretz, you change the letters again, and you get poretz, which means someone who breaks boundaries. And a potsar, a potsar, I've never heard that word. Rena, are you going to beat me to it? Potsar is right here. Well, I found pots, or maybe that's putz. That's a funny one. It doesn't give me potsar, so maybe it's not a word. It's possible. That's okay, because that happens. But what we see here is that, again, another example of changing ratzuf. Very good. Ratzuf is next, one after the other, right? Very good. See, so you just achieved that on your own, because he doesn't even write that here. That he does ritz po. Then he writes ritz po, which really would mean his floor. And ratzuf, yeah, he has that here also. Ratzuf meaning one after another. Okay, but all these concepts are not floating around alone in space. We have to think of ideas as being like neighbors in the psychic universe. They're neighbors because they have the same letters. And so that they're taking an idea and turning it and twisting it this way and that. And by focusing on that, automatically the mind starts to be freed from our normal way of looking at the world. Now we're going to do one ourselves. And this is what I've done elsewhere, and it's Shabbat. So I want everybody to write down the 6 ways you can permute the letters of Shabbat. Shin, Bet, Taf. And the next one was Shin, Taf, Bet. And the next one is Bet, Taf, Shin. And the next one is Bet, Shin, Taf. And the last 2 are Taf, Shin, Bet. And the second to the last one is Taf, Bet, Shin. Okay, now next to that 6 letters, I wrote them out in a column like that. I'm just not going to really be able to see it in this light. I'm sorry, but in a column. So then we write Shabbat. Well, Shabbat is a day of the day of Hashem, that he's given us, this gift from his great treasure house, he's told us. Now, shatab. What is shatab? Okay, well, we're going to come to that. And batash is a word that's related to batish, or a hammer, or to hit, to strike. Bashat is lashon boshet, which is shame. Tashav means to return. And tavash, what does tavash mean? Or tov? Well, we can split it up further, but I'm not going to do that right now. But you see, we have six three-letter combinations that produce Shabbat, strike, shame, return. And then if you treat the letters differently, tavosh means to make somebody shamed, and shat means to swim. Bet, you could translate that if you wanted to be a little bit more creative as a swimming bet. I'm not sure that's where we're going to go with this. But the point is that you see that each permutation, again, has a different lishtabesh. Very nice. Okay, that's a little bigger, but lishtabesh means to mess things up, right? Or to become, it's connected to the idea of yavesh or lishtabesh, the mind, where the mind becomes dry. You know, if you don't drink enough water on a hot day, you stop thinking very well. Okay, it's interrelated, but still. So what we're going to do now, which is the fun part. How are we doing on time? Okay, good. And this goes on. You can do this with every single word that you know. And he goes on to do it with other words. And then also you can take the gematria of the word, because remember, they all have the same gematria because they're the same letters. So that it also shows another level of interrelationship. He takes like halom, which is a dream, lech, which is the same letters as lechem, which is the same letters as melach, salt, bread, dream. They're all together. And uga, right, a cake, and haga, to feel this, or ga'ah is like disgust of a certain kind. Vagadea means to split, to separate, or to make into parts. And he goes on with many different examples. Some are more complex than others. But I think all of you can get the basic idea how this works. What we're going to do something is interesting. We're going to do this with your names. Okay, now only one name. So I know a lot of us have two names. We're not going to deal with that tonight. It's too complicated, way too complicated. If you have a 5-letter names, you should know you have 125 different permutations of your name. So like Michael, right? Michael is what? Mem, Yud, Kaf, Aleph, Lamed. Mem, Yud, Kaf, Aleph, Lamed. That's 5 letters. That's a big piece of work right there, because what we want to do is take our names and work the permutations of the letters of our name. And what we're going to do is expand the window of our perception of our own name. Okay, and that's going to help perhaps reveal things to us about ourselves. Okay, so I have a 5-letter name as well, Avraham. I write it on the page. The top line is Avraham. Now I can split now also, not only you don't have to even change the order of the letters to achieve some of this, because like Avraham is Everhem. They are a limb. Ever is a limb, and Hem is they. So the word Avraham can mean they are a limb. Of course, Avraham is a limb of, well, he's the root of the Jewish people, but he's a limb of the Shekhinah. And all souls, by the way, start out as limbs of the Shekhinah. It's just a giant, ever-growing tree. And what we don't want to do is get cut off, obviously, from that tree. Now, I can take the word and split it by the bet and the resh, and I have Av, father, Raham, or Haram, which in Arabic, Haram, I think, has different meaning, right, than it does in English. Like, it could be angry or harem, which is not exactly where we're going to go. Or Maher, Av Maher, right? That Avram was certainly zealous, and so on and so forth. There's 125 of these, but each one gives me a tiny little window on this name Avraham, maybe, and perhaps another understanding of Avram Avinu, and maybe myself. And so, Nicholas, I don't know what your Hebrew name is. Now, this is, if you don't have a Hebrew name, it's a little more, I don't have lecture notes from Esther Ruth. I read from the book of Rabbi Yosef Albertini, and then I am basically mapping out with you what I'm doing. So I assume that you could write the letters of your name in Hebrew and work this exercise. I'm sorry if I'm sure you can. Esther Ruth, I would just say your main name is Esther. Aleph, Samech, Taf, Resh, right? So there you have a 4-letter name. So then you start to work with Aleph, Samech, and start to spell the words and the letters in different ways. And I'm sure you will discover things like Esther's Seter, which also means hidden. And a Seter in Aramaic means a side, like the side of something, the side of the room. It goes on and on. Again, now, it doesn't matter how much Hebrew you know right now. The idea is just to get down as many letter combinations as you can come up with. Because the exercise itself is already loosening up the mind, to free the mind from our haram in Arabic means forbidden to my knowledge. Like harem. Like you put someone in harem in Hebrew. That's what it is. Okay, thank you. That's excellent. Because Hebrew is the root language, and we know that the night that Yosef was the last night of Yosef Atzadik in jail, we are told by the Midrash that the Malach Gavriel, I'd like to know, you guys have a faster dictionary than me. The Malach Gavriel came to Yosef Atzadik, we're told, and taught him 70 languages. Now, that's a lot of languages, folks. That's a lot of words, all in one night. It sounds like, what they did in the Matrix movie. They put a plug in your head, and they download you just type it in the Google, and it gives it to you. Very nice. Well, and they download the whole, how to fly a Huey helicopter, if I remember the movie correctly. So, but here, it was Yosef Atzadik learning all the 70 languages. So that he could be the viceroy of Egypt to deal with all the different nations that would come to Egypt very soon looking for bread. So you see, God doesn't give you a gift so that you can be happy with your gift. God gives you a gift to help the world, to reach out to the world. In Yosef's case, he had to be the new king de facto of Egypt, and he needed to be able to communicate with people. And so, but here, we're just trying to do the exercise to understand ourselves and understand concepts of ourselves. So, the Gemara does this with, the Chumash, does this with Avraham. It says, he bar am. He bar am. And he created them. Right? And so, there's another name, another permutation of these letters. So, Esther, you have to use your name, and Yedida, you use your name, and Nicholas, I'm not sure if you have a Hebrew name. If you don't have one, that's okay. You have to find out, how would I spell Nicholas? Nun, Yud, Kuf, Vav, Lamech, Samech, Nicholas. So that's already 6 letters. That's okay. You start with that. You start with Nicholas. Well, you see, you have Naki. The first one I see here is Naki, meaning clean. Or the word you could take the word Nicholas and create Nis. Nis is a miracle. Kol. Wow, look at that one. That's beautiful. Nes Koli, the miracle of my voice. That's a beautiful thing. That's really God speaking. God says, my voice is a miracle, folks. I can do anything with my voice. So that's Nicholas, if you interpret those letters. And so on, each of us. So let's see what we got. I'm at 305 or so? No, 205. I didn't change that clock. So we have some time to keep doing this together, but it's something you can do anywhere. You know, you could do it at work. Well, your boss might not like it or understand, but you understand what I mean. That this is a type of exercise. Once you learn it, you start to expand. And if you don't even know what the combinations mean, you go look them up afterwards and you'll find, just like we did with Nicholas, beautiful ideas embedded in it. And Nicholas is actually, of course, I know it's been used in Russia a lot. I don't know what the root Nikolai, maybe it's from Greek. The word Nikolai, I'm not sure if it's originally a Russian name, but that can be looked up very quickly as well. And so, and on top of it, like we said, you can take the gematria of the name and work with that as well. Because remember, think of gematria as like little windows where a lot of similar ideas emerge. Okay, and we want to be able to compare and relate concepts like they're real things, like they are real things, but I'm saying they treat them as if they're like living powers in front of you, because ultimately that's what the primordial Hebrew letters are. Okay, they are the living powers of God's expression of the world into existence. So you can't really, you can't do better than that. Any more questions or ideas? You guys have been helping me out a lot here, looking up different names. So you have to be able to, if you need help translating your English name or French name or Spanish name, whatever it might be, it's still phonetically relatable to Hebrew. Now, this idea of letter permutations and splitting words into two words, you can also do this in other languages. I was driving down a road in Jerusalem, and there's the Dan Panorama. It's a hotel, the Dan Panorama. And I just split the word. 4-letter names have, I believe, 16 different permutations, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, just to give you an example how you can do this as you're driving down the road, you take the word Dan, panorama, in English, and you write it out in Hebrew, Dalid Nun, Pan, Pei Nun, Panorama. Now, panorama can be spelled with a Vav or an Aleph, Panorama. What does it mean if you split it up into words? Dan, judge. Pan, or 24. What was that? 2 times 3 times 4? Oh, very good. Thank you. Some math people over there. That's good. I just remember the 5 ones because the permutation of the name Elohim is a very famous permutation in Kabbalah. It's a 5-letter name as well. But, excuse me. So Dan, Pan, judge, face, elevated. That's what that name of that hotel can be split into these three concepts: judging, the face, the elevated face. Pan is the face. Rama means elevated. So what does that teach me? I don't know. Maybe it teaches me something about the hotel. Maybe it teaches me about my viewpoint. Esther writes, Rabbi, is it about some same letters, same gematria, but different? Your note keeps falling down before I can read the whole thing. Esther, I'm sorry I can't. Maybe you can hold it up there longer. I don't know how that white goes down so quickly. Maybe it's my phone. But right, gematria, and so we have gematria. We have the position of the letters. We have the splitting of words, and then we have the relation of the Hebrew. What I call this translingual interpretation, where we're taking the same phonetics, the same consonants and vowels from language to language. We're translingual interpreting. So another example of that would be, I saw one recently. Well, the most famous one probably is America, right? Everybody likes to say America, Reka, an empty nation. It's not very flattering, but I felt a lot of emptiness there before I God opened up my eyes. Okay, but there's an example of how you take English and you go back into Hebrew again. So the Hebrew reveals something. I missed your note, Ariel. I'm sorry. You guys got to hold them up longer, or I don't know. Our minds are the computer's too fast for my mind. But this skill is not just a word game, like other word games. Okay, we are trying to extract essences of things, and we're trying to connect ideas in God's pure realm of thought. Okay, and when you do this enough, you will see what will happen. That you will have. Remember that what we read here from Rabbi Yosef about the harchavat hadat, expanding your knowledge, expanding your mind, until you can actually see that your mind and your body are two different things completely, until that you can push the boundary of thought all the way to the level of godliness, and so on and so forth. Because when you do this enough, you start to free yourself, and you think outside the box in a real way, and you are able to relate concepts that other people would never connect, and that derives that creates new teachings. So it's a skill you have to practice. I'd love to hear more from you about it. Maybe next week you guys will tell me some of the things that you discovered and the interesting ideas that you developed from this practice. Excuse me, because this, again, we are using the alphabet of God. We're not using human created language. And there's a lot we can talk about the language of Hashem and understand what it does for us, for our minds. And what I noticed is that it gets me thinking in a right direction, first of all. Simply gets me looking at things differently and paying attention to things differently. And you start to have a pickup. There's like a pickup that you get from reality around you by knowing the names of things. And remember, what was Adam's job in the garden? Naming everything that was in the garden. So when you know the names of things in Hebrew, you're already a light year ahead, and it's going to help. So I hope this has been a useful practice. We didn't really meditate on this, but you can. You can take your name and just meditate on it. Boggle. Now, Rhonda, how would anybody know Boggle? My mother and I used to play Boggle. But she was a Scrabble champion, so it was kind of like in the family. And here I am teaching Boggle. I'm sure Google would be interested They're already doing it at hyperlight speed. And halavai, that it should all be dedicated to the service of Hashem. So I'm going to say goodnight because I'm yawning too often for this for this stage in the shir. But I think we've put in some. We were a little late starting, and hopefully next week I'm going to get some of these things sorted out. But thank God, the old Samsung A5 came through. So thank God, and thank all of you, and thanks to the Lighthouse and Michael Ben Melech, and everybody should support the program and help us reach out to others, bring your friends, because this type of information is not so easy to come by. I know that I had to work many years, even though I've been a member of a Kabbalah Kollel for 27 years. Like I said, not everybody's learning Rabbi Yosef Al-Botini. And there's a reason for that, because we are working, as we get closer to the full redemption, what are we redeeming? We're redeeming our souls. We're not just going to get a new car and a better highway. Thank you, Adina. Please write me at avrahamshira.com, or at my email is rabbiavrahamshira@gmail. If you have some ideas of things we can do, I'm interested. And as the redemption continues, we're redeeming ourselves, our true divine selves. That's where the work is really happening. And this is, the Rav tells us that this is the direction, folks. And you don't have to be a master of language. You just have to be, he said it, you have to want to know, a powerful desire to know. And that itself will keep you on the track. Okay, so, and let's say I don't have a powerful desire to know. I just happen to turn on the Lighthouse tonight. Okay, that's fine. But the desire to know is your gasoline. It's your fuel that will keep you going. And if I don't have a lot of desire, then I'm going to run out of gas on the road. That's never fun, right? You have to call a tow truck or something. We don't need that. So we have to, so what do we do if I don't have the desire? So Rebbe Nachman, of course, as always, has the advice. Pray for desire. God, increase my desire. My desire is very low. I'm lazy. I'm tired. I'm this, I'm that, whatever it is. We can increase our desire. And when we do that, then we increase the heart's relationship to the mind and the ability, again, to bring these two powerful spiritual tools together, thought and feeling. So God bless you all. Have a great Shabbat. And we'll look for you next week. And maybe next week we'll start out talking some of this. I'd like to hear more of what you all have to say about it, and what you perhaps derive from your names and the combinations of the letters of your names, because those combinations are really our pieces of your higher self. And we need that. We all need that very much. So Shabbat Shalom. God bless all of you. All the best.